You're listening to Tales of the Dead. Today's episode is about the Draugr. Listener discretion is advised. We begin today's story in rural Norway, the morning mist thick over the forest, swallowing the place whole. A man had been walking for over an hour along an old logging trail behind his cabin. But today, the woods felt different. The air was still, oppressive even, as if the forest itself knew something was wrong. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, though the cold temperature made it unnecessary. It wasn't the chill that made him uneasy, it was something else. He'd walked these woods for years, but today the silence was unnerving. No wind, no rustling animals, nothing. The man told himself to get a grip. He came to clear his head, not to give in to old superstitions. Still, something gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't shake. He pressed on, the fog now so thick he could barely see his feet, his breathing shallow, each exhale vanishing into the mist. The trail looped back to the cabin eventually, he knew that. But today especially, it felt like it was taking a while. Yet, the weight of the silence kept him walking forward. Then, he heard it. A low, guttural moan. At first, he thought it was the wind. But it wasn't. It was too human. A shiver crawled down his spine. He froze, scanning the mist, heart racing. The groan came again, closer now, followed by a low scraping sound. The man's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet refused to move. He forced himself to call out, his voice weak and uncertain. There was no answer, but the sound continued. Groans, then scraping. A chill colder than the fog seeped into the air. Something cold, something evil. That's when he saw it. A figure emerged from the mist. It was humanoid. Humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Its skin was sickly grey, mottled with dark veins. His eyes were empty, dark pits that seemed to burn right through the man. His heart pounded in his chest as the creature's gaze fixed on him. The figure's mouth opened in a silent scream, revealing jagged teeth. The air around the man seemed to grow colder still, as if the fog itself had turned hostile. Draugr, the word hit him like a blow. Creatures of myth, risen from the graves of the dead, bound to the earth until disturbed. Legends he had heard as a child, but he never thought they were real, not until now. Without thinking, he stumbled backwards, his foot catching on a rock, fell hard into the wet grass. The Draugr paused, his head tilting to one side, as if studying him. The stench of death hung thick in the air. The man scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He remembered the old stories, the ones his grandfather had told him. The Draugr couldn't leave their graves unless disturbed. Something about this spot felt wrong. It had to be the grave of the creature. The creature hadn't attacked him yet. Maybe he actually hadn't disturbed the site yet. His heart slammed in his chest as the Draugr didn't move, didn't advance. It simply stood there, staring at him, watching him. But the man couldn't wait to figure it out. He turned and ran, ignoring the burning in his legs and the sting of the cold air. The fog thick, the creature's groans loud, yet as he pushed through the mist, the noise began to fade into the distance. The forest around him felt lighter, less oppressive. When he reached the edge, gasping for air, he dared glance behind him. The fog had begun to lift. There was no sign of the Draugr, no trace of the nightmare that had stalked him. Shaking, the man turned back towards his cabin. He didn't know if what he had seen was real, but he knew one thing for sure: he would never walk these woods alone again. The tale I just told was one of the Norse Draugr. The Draugr is an undead creature from Norse mythology. The Old Norse meanings of the word are revenant, undead man, and ghost. Draugrs live in the graves, often guarding treasures buried with them in their burial mound. The word may be related to the Swedish word drog, which means a pale, ineffectual, and slow-minded person that drags himself along. They're reanimated corpses. Unlike ghosts, they have a corporeal body with similar physical abilities as they possessed in life. These creatures are described as fearsome and grotesque in their appearance. Buried and in a state of decomposition, their bodies undergo reanimation. Trapped in a perpetual state of decay, their flesh is often depicted as black or bluish, emitting a putrid stench. Their eyes, when present, gleam brightly. They possess superhuman strength, they can shatter bones, and wield cumbersome weapons effortlessly. Legends also say they have the ability to shapeshift, assuming more monstrous forms to intimidate their adversaries. The Draugr are not a distinct species within Norse mythology, but rather the twisted embodiment of individuals who met an unfortunate fate. Those who died dishonourable deaths, were not properly buried, or were cursed, were more susceptible to becoming Draugr. This fate could befall warriors who died in battle, but were not deemed worthy of Valhalla, the resting place for honoured heroes. It could also encompass those who committed heinous crimes in their living days, condemned to return as vengeful spirits. Draugr are renowned in ancient Norse stories for their supernatural powers and abilities. They're famed for their strength, shapeshifting, and insatiable craving for human flesh. Additionally, they are known to hoard treasures within their tombs. Exhibiting a diverse array of abilities, Draugr stand as formidable adversaries. Their superhuman strength grants them dominance over most people effortlessly, while their near invulnerability to conventional weapons renders them nigh impossible to defeat in direct confrontations. Certain accounts depict them as having the ability to morph into monstrous forms, instilling heightened fear and wreaking havoc. Among their most chilling attributes is their connection to the realm of the dead. Allegedly, as a result, they possess the capability to drain the life force of the living. Moreover, they're believed to wield a degree of magical proficiency, enabling them to cast curses and inflict various other forms of harm upon their victims. Some Draugr were able to leave their dwelling place, the burial mound, and visit the living during the night. Such visits were universally horrible events, and often ended in death for one or more of the living, and warranted the exhumation of the Draugr by a hero. To defeat a Draugr, a hero was often necessary, since only such a man had the strength and courage to stand up to so formidable an opponent. The hero would often have to wrestle with the Draugr to defeat it, since weapons would do no good. It is said that the Draugr, even when defeated, would come back, requiring the hero to dispose of the body in unconventional ways. The most preferred method was to cut off the Draugr's head, burn the body, and dump the ashes in the sea. The emphasis being on making absolutely sure the Draugr was dead and gone. This is similar to the traditional practice of killing vampires seen in other cultures. The only other weakness the Draugr has is fire. Fire is a vulnerability shared by most of the corporeal undead, a sign that nature itself rebels against the existence of the undead. The ancient Norse people believed that even if a person was dead, their body could still move and do harm unless precautions were taken to prevent a potential Draugr from moving. The toes of the dead were tied together so they couldn't move, and nails or needles would be used to pierce the deceased's feet. Archaeologists have discovered several runestones that mention Draugr, one of which is dated back to the 10th century and is one of the oldest runestones in Sweden. Video games like Skyrim and God of War brought the image of the Draugr back into mainstream pop culture. Some even argue that the Game of Thrones White Walkers are heavily inspired by Draugr. That's the end of today's chilling chapter of Tales of the Dead. The Draugr might have terrified the ancient Norse people, but today its tales spread intrigue and mystery instead. If you enjoyed this dive into one of Europe's most unique legends and fancy listening to another spooky tale, check out my other episodes on the Jiangshi and the zombie. Thanks for joining me. Stay alive out there.